It's important to identify the right mix of frontal and active teaching, so that designing the teaching experience can give place to a deep and lasting learning. But what are the elements that a teacher must keep in consideration to design the right mix for his course? The starting point is the intended learning outcomes. If properly and consistently articulated with the assessment strategy, they will give a very useful guidance in the designing phase of the activities. The first step is to identify the intended learning outcomes that can be achieved through students' activities and which instead require frontal teaching. There are then different variables that need to be considered because they have an impact on the choice and the structures of the activities that we are going to design. The element that mostly has impact on the designing phase is the number of students. It can be useful to distinguish between small-medium classes, which do not exceed 70-80 students, and large classes, which count 100-150 students and more. In small-medium classes, there is a greater chance for a horizontal interaction. In other words, in this context, it is easier to imagine interaction among peers and also between teachers and single students. In large classroom, the focus shifted on the vertical interactions, with interaction between the teacher and the class, seen as a group, and among students divided into smaller groups. A second macro factor that impacts the designing phase is the time dedicated to activities, that is strictly correlated to the size of the class. For example, in a large class, more time will be needed for the activities instructions to spread among the network itself, or for everyone to complete the assigned activities. A last macro element to keep in consideration is the set of resources in terms of physical space and digital infrastructure. The learning spaces, their equipment and the infrastructure at our disposal can facilitate the sharing of different sources, the organization of collaborative activities and the co-construction of more complex results. We can deploy three strategies in the presence of non-optimal conditions or in case of large classes. First, using digital systems that can help us to share and manage information. Second, designing short activities that involve little organizational effort. Third, using a micro-blended format that involves individual acquisition of information before the lecture, freeing up time in class for more articulated activities. Whatever the activities we intended to assign are, it is important to spend some time on two fundamental steps. First of all, a macro designing of the program that briefly visualizes the modules and the frequency of the single activities and the program's primary objectives. This way, it becomes easier to reconfigure things if necessary. For each activity, the teacher should prepare a proper storyboard or screenplay, borrowing the terms from cinematographic lingo. For each phase, we should indicate who will do what, describing dynamics between students and the teacher, materials and tools that are necessary, the time and inputs required by the activities, and obviously the required outcomes. Thanks to this planning, we can optimize and simplify some steps and avoid useless waste of time or struggles in managing the activities. Indeed, if activities take too long or if certain parts are too complex to be carried out, the risk is to make students and lecturers think that the activities have failed, even if they were well designed and integrated in the teaching and learning experience. It is also important to remember that nothing is written in stone. The teacher designer must constantly monitor what is happening in class, collecting feedback and adapting things as they work. In conclusion, to find the right mix of frontal and active teaching, the starting point are the intended learning outcomes. Also, it is important to keep the macro elements that impact the designing process of the teaching and learning experience in mind, the number of students, the time and resources available. For every single activity, moreover, it is important to plan in great detail, creating a proper storyboard that helps the teacher to oversee every single aspect and be able to update things on the fly based on feedback emerging in the class.